Thank you very much for joining us. Here I am. In California, and it is 9 o'clock, so it's pretty late. But over there is going.
Hello. Yes, it is now just past 10:30 here, so it's pretty early by contrast.
Going. You are getting some.
I can hear you perfectly. Can you
Okay.
not hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I think we
Okay.
were having some sort of echo or something.
Oh, interesting. It was perfectly seamless for me, but okay, that's the internet.
Okay. All right. So let's go on with that. You can still hear me, okay, right?
Yeah, yeah, I can still hear you. Yep.
Okay. All right. So let's start. Let's start with yeah. Let's start with the self introduction, shall we? Let's go ahead and do this in English first. So, Go Wei, why don't you start introducing yourself in English?
Sure. I can tell there's kind of a lag, so bear with me if my responses are delayed. Um, hello everyone. I am Tyler Davis. I'm originally from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Um, and if you've never been to Fort Wayne, it's a lovely city, just over um, 250,000 people, something like that. I haven't looked up the population statistics in a while, and it's in a nice place in northeastern Indiana, and very nice place. But I personally haven't been back for about 5 years, but I do miss it a lot. I've been in Yangon now for about a year, over a year and a half, and I've been in Myanmar in general for about 2.5 years now. And let's see, before living in Yangon, I was in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and that's where I was studying my master's degree in linguistics. But my bachelor's degree came from Indiana University, Fort Wayne campus back in the States. So I'm very happy to be here, and right now I'm working as a school teacher at Lomini Academy in Yangon. So it's a pleasure to be here with you, Kenneth. Good to see you again.
Thank you very much. We've known each other for quite some time, so it's good to be live with you. I'm Kenneth Wong. I teach beginning and intermediate Burmese at UC Berkeley, and I'm the author of Easy Burmese and Survival Burmese from Tuttle Publishing. Now, Go Wei, let's do the same introductions again in Burmese. You go first.
ဟုတ်ကဲ့မင်္ဂလာပါကျွန်တော်နာမည်ဝင်းဟိန်ပါကျွန်တော်အမေရိကန်နိုင်ငံအင်ဒီယားနားပြည်နယ် Fort Wayne မြို့ပါအင်ဒီယားနားမြို့ဆိုတာကြတော့ဟိုရှီကာဂိုကနေဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ကားနဲ့သွားရင်တော့ဟို6နာရီလောက်6နာရီလောက်ဝေးမယ်ထင်တယ်အာကျွန်တော်တို့ဇာတိမြို့မှာဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဟိုမြန်မာနိုင်ငံသူနိုင်ငံသားအယောက်3000ကျော်တော့ရှိမယ်ထင်တယ်အရင်ကဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အယောက်9000ကျော်ပေါ့အာအဲ့ရနေပြီးတော့ကျွန်တော်ရဲ့ဟို Bachelor BA ပွဲကျွန်တော်ယူထားတယ်အဲ့ပြီးရင်ကျွန်တော်ယူရီးယားနိုင်ငံကိုသွားပြီးတော့ယူရီးယားနိုင်ငံချင်းမိုင်ပြည်နယ်ချင်းမိုင်မြို့ကနေရောဖယားတက္ကသိုလ်ကအာမဟာဝိဆပွဲကျွန်တော်ယူခဲ့တာဒါဘာသာဗေဒနဲ့ပေါ့နော်အဲ့ပြီးရင်တော့ကျွန်တော်နေပြည်တော်မြို့မှာ9 လလောက်နေပြီးအလုပ်လုပ်ခဲ့တာဖြစ်ပါတယ်ပြီးရင်တော့ရန်ကုန်မြို့ကိုဆင်းလာခဲ့ပြီးတော့ရန်ကုန်မြို့မှာကြတော့ဒီနှစ်ရန်ကုန်မြို့မှာနေရတစ်နှစ်ခွဲလောက်ရှိပြီခုကြတော့ကျွန်တော်သင်္ကန်းကျွန်းမှာလုံမနီကျောင်းမှာကျောင်းဆရာအလုပ်လုပ်ပါတယ်တွေ့ရတာအရင်ဝမ်းသာပါတယ်
Wonderful. ကျွန်တော်ကတော့ Kenneth Wong လို့ခေါ်ပါတယ်။ဉာဏ်နာမည်ကတော့အောင်နိုင်ဦးပါ။အခု Berkeley တက္ကသိုလ်မှာအခြေခံမြန်မာစာနဲ့အခြေခံလွန် intermediate မြန်မာစာသင်နေပါတယ်။နောက်ပြီးတော့ကျွန်တော်မြန်မာစာနဲ့ပတ်သက်ပြီးတော့ရေးထားတဲ့စာအုပ်နှစ်အုပ်ကတော့ Survival Burmese နဲ့ Easy Burmese လို့ခေါ်ပါတယ်။ Tuttle Publishing ဆိုတဲ့ထုတ်ဝေသူစီကမှာယူနိုင်ပါတယ်ခင်ဗျာ။ကဲစကားစလိုက်ကြရအောင်နော်ကိုမင်း။
Okay bye
According to Foreign Service Institutes, they rank the difficulty of languages based on how many hours it would take for a native English speakers to reach the point of fluency. And when it comes to Burmese, they said that it will take 1100 hours. Can I ask you, Go Wei, how long did it take you to reach the level that you were at? Can you give us some general idea?
Well, I don't know if I'd be prepared to give it to you in hours, but let me just say, for me, it was a rather non-standard situation because, um, as far as I understand, the FSI hours are classroom hours, and truth be told, I never spent any classroom time learning Burmese. There was a period for about off and on 4 to 6 months or so where I had a man who very kindly, out of the kindness of his heart, tutored me a bit on grammar, but that was not at all structured or standardized or anything. I would basically meet with him and he would say, okay, what are we working on? What do you want to know? But after a while, he wasn't really free to do that anymore, so I was left to my own. But for me, I would say that I started learning in about 2010, 2010 or so. But in the beginning, it was very difficult because even though Fort Wayne had a large Burmese population, not all Burmese people wanted to speak to me in Burmese at the time. And even the ones who did, they may have not been that fluent themselves because they may have been from another ethnic group or uh, for example, a lot of the youth in Fort Wayne at the time anyway did not know how to read or write in Burmese but could speak. So any question that I had in terms of reading or writing, they wouldn't be able to help me with. Um, but those were just obstacles that I had to kind of work around. I would say that um, I really started getting better at speaking Burmese around 2013, and I would say there was a huge jump between 2007 to 2000, or sorry, 2010 to 2013, and then I've slowly been kind of going in between just plateauing and getting slightly better and plateauing again since then. But the largest improvement was between 2010 and 2013, I would say.
Hmm.
So about
So
3 years. I don't know how many classroom hours that would be, but I would say maybe FSI is correct.
some people spend 3 years but still am not able to get to the level that you are. So it says a lot about your dedication and the amount of work that you put into it. It seems like it also has to do with your motivation for learning Burmese. So if somebody has a good motivation for wanting to learn a language, it goes a long way to keep them motivated throughout the um, learning plateau. တကယ်တော့ learning plateau ဆိုတဲ့စကားလုံးကဗမာစကားထဲမှာမရှိဘူးထင်တယ်နော်ဘယ်လိုခေါ်မလဲ
ရှိတော့မရှိတော့ဘူးထင်တယ်ဟုတ်တယ်
ဟုတ်ဘာသာစကားလေ့လာရေးလွင်ပြင်လို့ပြောရမလားမသိဘူးဘာဖြစ်လို့လဲဆိုတော့အဲ့ဒီအဆင့်ရောက်သွားလို့ရှိရင်ဒီတက်ပို့ပြီးတော့တိုးတက်မှုကသိမတွေ့ရတော့ဘူးဘယ်နေရာကြည့်ကြည့်တပြေးညီဖြစ်နေတယ်လို့ပဲဆိုလို့ပေါ့နော် so you don't seem to
ဟုတ်တယ်
see any kind of improvement for a long way to come. How do you get yourself motivated throughout this so-called learning plateau ဘယ်လိုကိုအားပေးလဲခင်ဗျပြင်းလာလို့ရှိရင်စိတ်ပြတ်လာရင်
ဟုတ်အခုဆိုဗမာလိုပြောရမလားအင်္ဂလိပ်လိုပြောရမလားမသိဘူးဟို
let's
အခုဆို
try both. Maybe do
yeah
some
yeah
in Burmese, some in English. Yeah.
yeah um အခုချိန်နေကိုပြောမယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဟိုဒီလိုဖြစ်နေတယ်ဗျအခုကျွန်တော်ရဲ့အကောင့်ကျိုးတစ်ခုကကြတော့ဒီဟိုမရောက်ခင်ကလေးကဗမာစကားကိုတက်ပြီးသားဆိုတော့ဒီဟိုရောက်ပြီးမှစတင်တဲ့လူတွေထက်ကျွန်တော်တို့တွက်ပါလွယ်လဲဆိုတော့ကျွန်တော်လေရင်ငါးနေပြီးတော့စဉ်းလာစဉ်းစားပြီးတော့မခက်ခဲပါဘူးဒါပေမဲ့ပြဿနာကကြတော့အခုကျွန်တော်လှုပ်လဲလှုပ်နေတယ်ဆိုတော့ကျွန်တော်ရဲ့အချိန်ကိုအတော်လေးကိုဂရုစိုက်ရတယ်ဆိုတော့ဘာသာစကားကိုတကယ်ကိုပုံပြီးတော့တိုးတက်ချင်တယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ကိုကလေအဲ့ဒီဘာသာစကားကိုလေ့လာဖို့ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အချိန်တော်လေးကိုပေးရတယ်ဒါပေမဲ့အလုပ်လဲလုပ်နေတဲ့အခါကျတော့ကိုကလည်းအလုပ်လုပ်ပြီးတော့စိတ်ကလည်းပင်ပန်းတယ်ကိုကလည်းအနားပဲယူချင်တယ်ကိုကထပ်ပြီးတော့ဟိုဟာလေဘယ်လိုပြောမလဲအားမထည့်ချင်ဘူးအားလည်းနည်းနည်းလျော့သွားပြီဆိုတော့ကိုကပုံပြီးတော့အားထည့်ဖို့ကကြတော့နည်းနည်းခက်ခဲနေတယ်ဆိုတဲ့အခါကျတော့ကိုကသူများကိုအမြဲတမ်းပြောတယ် ကိုကဘာသာစကားတစ်ခုကိုလေးလာခြင်းနဲ့ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အချိန်ပဲအတော်လေးကိုပေးရတယ်အချိန်မပေးဘဲနဲ့ကိုကသင်လို့ရအောင်အဲ့ဒါအင်္ဂလိပ်လိုပြန်ပြောမယ်So what I was just saying is one advantage that I have over others who are living in Yangon trying to learn Burmese is that I already spoke Burmese before I even got here. Just as soon as the plane hit the ground in the airport, I could get off the plane and immediately talk to anybody in Burmese, how fluent or how not fluent that may be. But for somebody, for example, who would not have learned much Burmese before coming here, and they're coming here to work, for example, you then have to, decide how much time am I going to give to learning Burmese besides working. For me, after a long day of work, I'm tired and I don't want to, I don't want to put much effort into studying. And that's what you have to do. You have to be able and willing to put a lot of time into it. And that's something I tell even Burmese people who want to learn English or want to learn Spanish or whatever it may be. I say, the number one thing is you have to give time to it. You can't just expect, that you meet somebody on the street and say, hey, I know that you speak this language. Let me teach you Burmese and you can teach me Spanish or whatever. And then in no time we'll both be fluent. I mean, that doesn't really work that way. You have to work at it. It is a skill. Just like a carpenter or somebody has to, practice whittling until they can whittle perfectly. You have to practice speaking, you have to practice listening, practice reading, practice writing, and you have to fine tune it. I mean, it's a skill just like everything else.
The article that you wrote from Myanmar Times called Top
Yep.
10 Things Every Burmese Learner Should Pay Attention to. One of the things that you suggest was actually going to the tea shop. So နည်းနည်းဆွေးနွေးကြရအောင်เนาะကိုဝင်းဟင်းလက်ဖေးဆိုင်သွားရခြင်းရဲ့အကျိုးကျေးဇူးနည်းနည်းပြောကြည့်ပါလားအင်္ဂလိပ်လိုစပြောပြီးတော့ပမာလိုပြောဒါမှမဟုတ်ပမာလိုစနောက်အင်္ဂလိပ်လိုပြောပါเนาะ
Yeah, sure. I'll speak in English first. So, yeah, at a tea shop, the reason I mentioned a tea shop is because even though it's kind of noisy, even though it's maybe a little bit chaotic at times, it's a nice casual place where you can talk to people who are maybe not always used to dealing with foreigners. And how can that be a good thing? It's a good thing because they won't try to necessarily speak to you in a way that some Burmese may be accustomed to speaking to foreigners. I see it all the time where, these foreign INGO workers or something like that are talking with a Burmese person and they always just say these things, like, okay, Jesu ba, oh, bamalo yan tere no, oh, tore, oh, Jesu tene, okay, good evening ba, okay. And, they put on this, easy version of speaking Burmese just to, make the foreign worker, practice the 4 phrases that they know or something. And
they won't give
that's
you
it.
a free compliment. They won't give you a compliment.
They won't give you. Yeah, they'll talk to you. So the workers at the tea shop or even other people at the tea shop, they'll just speak to you kind of naturally because they don't know how else to act with somebody. And that really is, even from me, right? Today I encountered, a situation where something is going on with my water pipes, right? And so I try to call up the maintenance man and, I forget the word for, spigot, right? But now I know it's baikao, right? But how was I supposed to know that? Yeah, baikao, because in Burmese, everything is bite. A pipe is a pipe is a bite, and a hose is also a bite, and
plumbing,
a spigot. Yeah, anything with plumbing is just bite. Yeah, and so I'm like, I'm trying to explain because I know it's bite something, but I'm like, oh, the bite. But then he's like, oh, you're talking about the hose. And I'm like, no, not that bite. The bite inside the wall bite. So I had to say, like, Nayantega bite. But so, I mean, whenever we encounter a new situation, no matter how experienced we may be with one thing, we kind of default to our, original, worldview, right? And so with the people in the tea shop, it's kind of the same thing. You go to the tea shop and you speak to, say, the waiters, waitresses, or anybody sitting there reading a newspaper, maybe. If they're not used to interacting with foreigners, they'll just default into, well, in my experience, one of 2 things. Either they'll speak to you like a regular Burmese person or they'll speak to you like a child. So if you're just beginning to learn, speaking like a child even maybe isn't so bad. If you're somewhere more advanced and they speak to you like a child, then it may seem a bit demeaning, but at least they don't have kind of this, oh, this is a foreigner, let me dumb my Burmese down a bit. You get a more natural flow. And for me, one thing that even still to this day hinders my understanding is like when a lot of external noises are going on or a lot of other people are talking. So trying to talk to someone at the tea shop, I find is like kind of good, hard mode exercise for me because it forces me to try to focus a lot more and to block out external noise. I can do that very well in English. Say if we had a lot of you know, like this kind of shh noise or whatever in the background while we're speaking, it wouldn't bother me at all. It might bother you though, or it might bother someone else who does not speak English as a first language. But for me in Burmese, that is very bothersome, especially if I'm on the street and say a lottery ticket truck is coming by, blaring a lot of music. No matter what somebody says to me, I probably end up missing about 30% of it because my attention is now divided. Um, but so that's something I always work on. And I think a tea shop is a good place for that. So you get not only more authentic speaking experience with the people who work there, but you're also in kind of a loud, noisy environment. And so you have to learn to focus. Um, you can do things like uh, point at different foods and say, "Erabalu kole, dabalu kole," and you can get more food vocabulary that way. If it's downtime, I've had some of the young tea shop uh, children, the child workers there. They'll sit near me and they'll ask me questions about America. That's another topic on its own, by the way, because I can tell a lot of people there they want to talk to me, but they just don't know what to ask me. They're like, oh, I want to ask this person something, but I know nothing about America or anything. So what on earth do I ask them? Like I said, that's another topic on its own. But
One of the
either
thing that
way, yeah.
one
Go
of the
ahead.
thing that I ask my students, one of the reason I usually encourage my students if they have a chance to go to Burmese
Hmm.
tea shop is so that they get exposed to different ways of different a wide range of people speaking Burmese in a different way,
Hmm.
right? Because you've
Yep.
got လူတန်းစားအလွှာပေါင်းစုံကလူတွေပြောတဲ့ဗမာစကားမျိုးပေါ့အသက်ကြီးတဲ့လူတွေပြောတဲ့ဗမာစကားစိုက်ကားဆရာပြောတဲ့ဗမာစကားနောက်ပြီးတော့
ဟုတ်တယ်ဟု
ကျော
တ်တယ်
င်းသားကျောင်းသူတွေပြောတဲ့စကားမျိုးစုံပေါ့လေ so that way you are not just exposed to the standard Burmese that your teachers are likely to say or the standard Burmese that comes with the recorded lessons in the books, but more authentic, natural kind of Burmese. Even down to small little things like how in normal setting Burmese people would express surprise or how they
Yeah.
would signal to you that they want to interrupt you to say something or things like that. Those things don't come in grammar books, right? You have to
No, they
sort of
don't.
be in a natural environment ကျွန်တော်ကိုဝင်းဟိန်ကိုလေစာရေးတဲ့အကြောင်းနည်းနည်းမေးကြည့်ချင်တယ်နော်script အကြောင်းပေါ့လူတော်တော်များများ
Oh.
ဒီအကြောင်းသိချင်ကြတယ်ဆိုတော့ a lot of people have that question is it how important is the script learning the script can you actually get to the level that you are do you think somebody would get to the level that you are without learning to read or write Burmese ဗမာစကားမရေးတတ်ရင်မဖတ်တတ်ရင်ကိုဟင်းဟင်းလို့ကိုဝင်းလျောင်နီးပါးဗမာစကားကိုကျွမ်းကျွမ်းကျင်ကျင်ပြောနိုင်တဲ့အဆင့်အထိရောက်နိုင်ပါမလားဘယ်လိုထင်လဲခင်ဗျ
ဟုတ်ကဲ့ကျွန်တော်ထင်တယ်အဲ့ကေအောင်မတင်ပဲနဲ့လူတစ်ယောက်ကကျွန်တော်အဆင့်ထိတာကိုလာတော့လာနိုင်ပေမဲ့လည်းအာသူတို့အဲ့ကေအောင်တိမယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်တော့ဗမာစာကိုတကယ်ကိုရေးတက်ဖတ်တတ်မယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ပိုလွယ်မှာပေါ့ဘာလို့လဲဆိုတော့တခုဟွာလေစဉ်းစားကြည့်လိုက်ပေါ့ကိုကစားမဖတ်တတ်ဘူးဆိုလို့ရှိရင်စားမရေးတတ်ဘူးဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ကိုရဲ့ကိုသိချင်တဲ့ဟာတွေဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အပိဓာန်ကနေရှာလို့မရအောင်เนาะပြည့်လဲဆိုတော့ဒီမြန်မာအပိဓာန်ကျွန်တော်စောက်စင်ပုံမှာအပိဓာန်အမျိုးမျိုးရှိတယ်အဲ့ရအပိဓာန်နေမှာဆိုလို့ရှိရင်မြန်မာစာနဲ့ပဲရှိတယ်ဟိုမြန်မာစာမပါတဲ့ဟာကြတော့ဟိုဒီတစ်မျိုးပဲရှိမယ်ထင်တယ်ဒီ Bible Publishing ကထုတ်ဝေတဲ့ဟာပေါ့ so so
You
ဒီ
mean
ဟာ
this
ဆိုလို့
one?
ရှိရင်ဒါဟုတ်တယ်ဒီဟာပဲဟုတ်တယ်
Yes.
so ဟုတ်တယ် Bible Publishing နဲ့ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အင်္ဂလိပ်အက္ခရာကိုသုံးပြီးတော့အတန်ထွက်နဲ့ရှာလို့ရတာပေါ့အဲ့ဒါကြောင့်တစ်ခါလေရရင်ဟိုတအားသုံးကြတဲ့အချိန်ရှည်တွေတော့ရှိတယ်ပြစ်လဲဆိုတော့ရေးတော့အမှန်ဖတ်တော့အတန်တော့ရှိရပေါ့ဒါပေမဲ့အဲ့ဒီအခြေအနေပြင်ကြတော့စာအုပ်တက်တယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ပိုလွယ်တယ်အဲ့ဒါအင်္ဂလိပ်လိုတစ်ခါပြန်ပြောမယ် so
Please.
yeah, all I was saying is that sure, it's possible for someone to get to a level similar to mine without knowing how to read or write Burmese, but I don't know why you would do that to yourself. It's so much easier just to learn the script. I mean, just do it. I learned it in literally like 2 weeks without even understanding any of the words that I learned. And I mean, yeah, you could get some dictionaries like the Baibun Publishing Dictionary, which is very good, by the way, for a beginning dictionary. And I mean, yeah, it's got a section where you can look things up by like the Romanized Burmese. But besides the certain words in Burmese that are pronounced differently than they're spelled, I don't know why you would want to do that to yourself. It just learn the script, just learn it. that's my advice. Just learn it. Don't intentionally hinder yourself or think you can get by without doing it. Even if you could, why would you do that to yourself? Just learn the script. Trust me, you'll thank me later.
Wayne, one of the things that you said in your article is because when English speakers hear that Burmese is a tonal language, that sounds very intimidating to them because their native language is not a tonal language. So you actually say in your article that people should focus on learning the word, not the tones. Let's talk about it a little bit. ကိုဝင်းရဲ့ sound bar ထဲမှာရေးထားတယ်เนาะဗမာစကားကိုလေ့လာတဲ့လူတွေကအတန်အတက်အကျအနှိမ့်အမြင့်ကိုစဉ်းစားပြီးတော့စိတ်ပူနေမဲ့အစားစကားလုံးကိုလေ့လာပါလို့ကိုဝင်းကရေးထားတယ်အဲ့လိုအကြံပေးတဲ့အကြောင်းလေးနည်းနည်းရှင်းပြပါလား Explain it to us. What do you mean by that?
Okay, အဲ့ဒါလည်းရေးတော့အမှန်ဖတ်တော့အတန်ပေါ်မူတည်တာပေါ့နော်မလို့လဲဆိုတော့တချို့စကားလုံးတွေဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ကိုရဲ့ခုနပြောသလိုအတန်အနှိမ့်အကျအတက်အမြင့်ဒီလိုဖြစ်တဲ့တယ်ဆိုရင်လည်းတကယ်ပြောတဲ့ခါကျတော့တကယ်အတန်ထွက်တဲ့ခါကျတော့တန်ထွက်လာကြတော့တမျိုးကြီးဖြစ်တယ်ဆိုတဲ့ခါကျတော့ဘယ်လိုပြောမလဲကျွန်တော်ကျောင်းမှာကြောက်ကလေးတယောက်တော့ရှိတယ်သူ့နာမည်ကမင်းတက်ဟန်လို့ခေါ်တယ်သူ့နာမည်ကဆိုတော့စကားလုံးတစ်လုံးချင်းစီကိုပြောမယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်မင်းတက်ဟန်လို့ထွက်ရမှာပေါ့ဒါပေမဲ့တကယ်တမ်းကို Kenneth ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အဲ့ဒီသူ့ရဲ့နာမည်ကိုအမြန်နဲ့ပြောမယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဘယ်လိုထွက်မှာလဲထွက်ကြည့်
တော်ထွက်ရခက်မယ်မင်းသက်ဟန်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်နောက်ဆုံးကြလို့ရှိရင်အတူကောင်းနဲ့မင်းသက်မဲ့ဖြစ်ချင်းဖြစ်သွားနိုင်မယ်
ဟုတ်တယ်မင်းသက်ဟန်ဆိုတော့မင်းသက်ဟန်လို့အတိအကျထွက်မယ်ဆိုပေမဲ့လည်းတကယ်ပြောတဲ့အခါကျတော့မင်းသက်ဟန်အဲ့လိုပဲထွက်တာဆိုတော့မင်းသက်ဟန်ဆိုတော့မင်းဆိုလို့ရှိရင်မင်းလို့ပဲထွက်ရတလုံးတည်းဆိုလို့ရှိရင်မင်းကမင်းပဲဒါပေမဲ့မင်းသက်ဟန်အတန်းကိုအကြဖြစ်မဲ့အစားကြောင့်အတက်နဲ့ဖြစ်သွားတယ်ဆိုမင်းသက်ဟန်ဖြစ်မဲ့အစားမင်းသက်ဟန်အဲ့လိုဖြစ်သွားတယ်ဆိုတဲ့ခါကျတော့စကားလုံးဘာလဲအတန်းအနှိမ့်အမြင့်အတက်အကျတွေဘယ်လိုပြောင်းလဲလဲအဲ့ဒီစနစ်တွေအဲ့ဒီစီကန်းတွေကိုတင်မဲ့စာစကားလုံးတွေဥပမာသူ့နာမည်ဘယ်လိုခေါ်လဲသူ့နာမည်မင်းသက်ဟန်ကဲဘယ်လိုစလုံးပေါင်းလဲဒီလိုစလုံးပေါင်းတယ်ကဲတခါတည်းနှစ်ခုစလုံးကိုတင်လိုက်ပြီကဲခရမ်းချင်းတီးဘယ်လိုခရမ်းချင်းတီးဘယ်လိုခေါ်လဲခရမ်းချင်းတီးကဲဘယ်လိုရေးလဲဘယ်လိုစလုံးပေါင်းလဲဒီလိုစလုံးပေါင်းတယ်ပြီးပြီရောအင်္ဂလိပ်လိုပြန်ပြောမယ်အဲ့ဒါကို so yeah the tones are not always consistent right I just used an example even with names because certain names for example if I were to break it up by the syllable like for example one name Min That Ham right if you were to just take the min it would be min and then just the that, it would be that, and then just the han would be han. But then when you put it together, you don't say min that han, you say min that han. So the me, instead of being kind of like a falling tone, it turns into this kind of rising tone. Me, and then that being um, like higher than the me, that han, and then it goes down. So I mean, there are kind of rules that govern this. There is a science to it if you look at it linguistically. But instead of everybody needing to learn the science to it, instead of everybody to learn needing to learn all these rules to how the tones change and everything, just learn the words. So what's his name? Tu name blue khole. Tu name Min That Han phit pare. His name is Min That Han. And then you just remember, okay, Min That Han, Min That Han, Min That Han. And then the pronunciation stays with you. And then, okay, how do you write his name? You write his name like this. And then you just remember it as kind of this block rather than, okay, his name is meh, and that's normally a falling tone, but now it's kind of this rising tone. And that, okay, that's a nasalized, creaky tone. And then ha, okay, that's the low tone. I mean, instead of memorizing all that, you just memorize the thing, man, that ham. Um, for example, even if we take the word that, so that shene, so the verb that shene for to be
To be
clean,
clear.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you were to put ye at the end, so how is that pronounced then? Do you say that shin ye? No, you don't say that shin ye. You say that shin ye, right?
担心也
So
yeah.
yeah, that shin ye. But does that mean that the shin now disappears or it's less exaggerated? No, it's just because of because the way that the word comes together, the ye at the end just alters the sound of the tone. But
Mhm.
instead of having to memorize, okay, if I put a ye at the end, then the falling tone in the middle now becomes no, just memorize the word. So that shene is the word for clean, and then that shenye is the word for cleanliness or cleaning. That shenye is more. It could be cleanliness too, right? No, that would be that shenmu, wouldn't it? Uh, I don't.
That's a noun form, so it's definitely
Yeah,
it
yeah,
could be cleanliness too. But I think
yeah,
you do have a point. Even a simple phrase like "How are you?" in Nikang La, there is suddenly an internal sing-song rhythm to it that is definite.
yeah,
It shouldn't be Nikang La. It should be Nikang La. But within that Nikang La, there are many different ways in which the speaker might map their emotions into it, the way they
yeah.
might say it when they are
Right.
doubtful whether you're feeling well or not, or the way they are screaming the phrase at you from across the street to see how you're doing. All of those affects the real tone. So I guess the key is
Mm-hmm.
the way you said, going to the tea shop and listening to a lot of different ways people will say "nei gong la"
Yep.
is probably a better approach than trying to remember whether "nei" is a rising tone or "la" is a falling tone and be
Right.
obsessed about it. One of the comment that came through is that karaoke is helpful in learning language. That may be true for some people. Is it true for your experience? Do you like to sing?
Oh, oh, definitely. Yeah, I
Amata
mean, because of ဟုတ်ကြိုက်တယ်ဟို COVID ကြောင့်ဆိုတော့ကျွန်တော်မစိုးဖြစ်တာတော့ကြာပြီဆိုတော့ကျွန်တော်မှလည်းဟိုဟုတ်တယ်ဟုတ်သွားလို့မရအောင်ကျွန်တော်မှလည်း VCD ခွေတော်များများတော့ရှိတယ်ဒါပေမဲ့ဒီမှာကျတော့ KTV စက်တော့မရှိဘူးအာ KTV ကျွန်တော်မြန်မာနိုင်ငံရောက်ခါစားတော့ဆိုလို့ရှင်ကျွန်တော်ဟိုတငယ်ချင်းတယောက်ဟဲ့ဒိုနေရောက် KTV သွားရအောင်ဆိုပြီးတော့ကျွန်တော်ပြောလိုက်တယ်ဒါပေမဲ့ तू ကနားလေးမှုနဲ့လွဲသွားဟာမင်းကဘာလို့ KTV သွားချင်လဲ तू က तू ကကျွန်တော်တမျိုးကြီးထင်တာဘာဖြစ်လဲဆိုတော့အဲ့အချိန်ရောက်တော့ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ကျွန်တော်မသိဘူး KTV မှာဟိုဟာဖြစ်တာဘာညာဖြစ်တာဆိုတော့ကျွန်တော်မသိဘူးဟိုသွားပြီးသချင်းဆုံးပါပဲလို့ကျွန်တော်ထင်ခဲ့တာပဲဒါပေမဲ့အဲ့ဒါတော့မိသားစု KTV Family KTV ပေါ့ဟို
There are
ရိုးရိုး
certainly
KTV ပြောရင်တော့တမျိုးကြီးဖြစ်သွားတယ်ဟုတ်တယ်
different types of usages of the premise, you say. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I was just saying is when I first, I was very excited because those who know me know that karaoke was the main way that I actually was able to learn the script because even though I didn't understand much of the words, I was able. I think individually I have a good musical memory, more than I do like I can't really recite things like Burmese kids learn to do in schools and things like that, but I can memorize melodies very easily. So, I would be listening to Burmese songs over and over again, and I was able to make the link between, the cursor going across the text on the screen. And even though I couldn't learn the tones from that, I was able to, get my Burmese for Beginners book and then piece together, okay, yeah, when this character is next to this one, it makes this sound, or when this thing is on top of that, it makes that sound. When this thing is underneath that, it makes that sound. And I was able to kind of memorize that. And then I had a melody to kind of, map it to, right? And so even though I understood absolutely none of the words, after a while I could read the karaoke and I could sing along by myself. So it was very weird. My Burmese friends would talk to me and my speaking was just horrible. But then if I, pulled out the microphone and started singing, they'd be like, "What?" Because it's like, how could you sing this song so well, but then you can't speak very well? They had no idea. It's like, well, I don't understand any of the words. I just know what I'm saying, right? Um, but yeah, you were just asking about what I was saying before. Is when I first came to Myanmar, I was so excited. It's like, oh, I can go to a karaoke bar now and let's sing karaoke. But here in Myanmar, if you go to your buddy and you say, hey, let's go to a KTV, there's a secondary meaning to that. I guess
You
maybe
may have
now
to
it's more of a
clarify what exactly you're
yeah,
talking about.
yeah. So I've learned since there's family KTV, which you actually go to do karaoke, and then there's a KTV where you go for other nighttime activities. And I wasn't really uh, interested in participating in those, but and my friend knew better. That's why he was just like, "Huh? What are you talking about? Why do you want to go to a KTV?"
Well,
And
one of
but
the one of the challenges
yeah,
my English speaker friends often say with Burmese is that in English, when you refer to
hmm
yourself, you say I, and that's I, and the other person is
yep,
you, and they are you. But in Burmese, however, depending on the age of the person, depending on the position, the social hierarchy, how well you know each other, you actually have to use a different register, the formal, the polite register. Um, ကိုယ်နဲ့စကားပြောနေတဲ့လူရဲ့အသက်အရွယ်ယာဒူဘယ်လောက်ထိခင်မင်ရင်းနှီးလဲဆိုတာ ਨੇ အမ်အဲ့ဒီအဲ့ဒီပုံမှာမူတည်ပြီးတော့เนาะကိုသုံးတဲ့နာမ်စားမတူဘူးပေါ့ the pronoun choices that you use are very difficult different ဒါကိုဝင်းဟင်းရဲ့အတွက်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အခက်အခဲတစ်ခုလားဒီဟာဒီဟာကိုဝင်းဟင်းဒီဟာအခက်အခဲဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဒါကိုကိုဝင်းဟင်းကဘယ်လိုကြော်ဖြတ်ခဲ့တယ်လဲဘယ်လိုလေ့လာခဲ့တယ်လဲဆိုတော့နည်းနည်းရှင်းပြပါလား tell us how you overcome that part of it.
sure. Well, um, when I first started learning Burmese, I was mainly using Gene Mesher's Burmese for Beginners, and he wisely just taught all men to use Jano and all women to use Jama. And I think that's a pretty good start. It's a safe place to be, I would say. If you're not sure what to use, just go ahead and say Jama if you're a woman or Jano if you're a man. Of course, you also have to know that women from the Mandalay region will always say Jano instead of saying Jama. Jama is more of a, outside of the upper Myanmar region thing. But if you meet a woman down in Yangon who says Jano, she's probably one of two things. She's either a feminist or she's from upper Myanmar where they say Jano instead of Jama. But Jano, for some people, Jano might sound a bit demeaning because it comes from the 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 word Jundal, which is like royal slave, right? So people are like, I'm not a slave. I don't want to call myself a slave. But it really, when people say Jundal or whatever, they don't have that connotation really to it. But as in terms of other things, so you might find old books or you might hear people calling each other nga, and then you might think, oh, let me just try calling myself nga, right? Well, nga is not, even though it's gender neutral and it seems like it's just common and you can hear people saying it, it's not a pronoun that you should use right off the bat, especially if you're not close to somebody. One good thing to gauge is to listen to what pronouns people use with you. So if you hear somebody start saying "nga" to you, then, or if you hear somebody start saying "nain" to you, first see if they're angry at you about something. If they start calling you "nain" and they seem like they're angry, they're probably trying to insult you, or they're probably trying to pick a fight with you. But if they're just casually talking like this, and if I was calling you "nain" or or I was saying "ah" to you, that's something more of a close friendship, right? And so then if you hear somebody using name with you, or they refer to themselves as nga, then sure, you can go ahead and say nga with them. And that's a pretty safe indicator. I wrote long time ago when I had my old blog, I wrote a post where my theory is, and Go Kenneth, you can interrupt me if you think this is wrong, but my big theory was if you weren't sure what to do, just go ahead, besides the Jano and Jama, just go ahead and address yourself as your name. And that's always a safe bet too. I have a lot of friends who do that. Uh, some friends, particularly female, will also address themselves by their name, right? So instead of calling themselves, Mathanda or something, they'd call themselves, oh, I don't
Tanda.
know, Pupu or Bisi or something like that. But you know, I'm not saying don't call yourself Pupu or Bisi necessarily, but I could say Wehe Azaro Dilutene, who go Kenneth, and so instead of saying, you or something, I could address Kenneth by his name, I could address myself by my name, and even though it might sound weird to native English speakers, it's acceptable to do it here, and they even do it in Japan as well with Japanese, as far as I understand. But
Um, it,
maybe I'm a bit misunderstanding that point. What do you think, Kenneth? Would you use your name when addressing yourself with anybody?
I'm less likely to do it, but I know that it is actually a fairly common practice, especially among young women. So
Yeah,
somebody named Momo will certainly likely to refer to themselves as Momo. Talking
yeah,
about I went to the movie theater, they'll say Momo dine yokshin de. That
I know.
means literally they are saying Momo went to the movie theater, but they're talking
But
about
they're
them
talking about themselves.
movie theater. And it is certainly a polite practice instead of using kanya to use the other person's name. So if I
Yeah,
want to ask you, you know, um, what did you do this morning? Instead of saying kanya di ne mane ba lo le, which in Burmese sounds very confrontational, I'm more likely
yeah,
to
it does.
say "Kuweheng di ne mane ba lo le." That probably is the way that I would uh, the way that I would do it to you. Kuweheng, the other thing that I want you to address is that you say focus on the positive and not on the negative. And let's talk about that a little bit. Certainly,
Hmm.
if you're learning a new language, you're going to make mistakes, and there'll be the grammar will frustrate you. Certain pronunciations will be difficult for you. What are the
Hmm.
good things that you focus on?
Yeah. So the good things that I focus on are, even though it may seem frustrating, I realize that I am, you know, and this may sound a bit narcissistic, but you kind of have to, cheer yourself up when it does get frustrating. I am, speaking a language that a lot of the society here truly believes that Westerners are not really naturally able to speak. I mean, if you look at the majority of people here, if I were to go out and ask them on the street, um, or if I, like, for example, if I took you, Coconut, and I took you with me, and we were going together, and you were to interview everybody on a street and say, do you think this guy speaks Burmese? If they didn't know me, they would say, no,
Maybe
because
not.
they don't expect me to. The majority of the foreigners that they see coming through here would not be able to speak to them at all. And so I have to constantly remind myself that a lot of the times when they don't understand when I speak to them, it's not always because I'm making mistakes. I might be making some mistake, but it's probably more that they sometimes have not even registered that I'm speaking to them in Burmese because they just don't expect it. So, we're still kind of in this time where foreigners are just now starting to pick up the pace. It's not just, John O'Kell and three other people, may he rest in peace. But it's, a lot more are learning it now. There's more of a community that's making an effort to learn it, and that's good. But it's still, because of different things, the visa and immigration bureaucracy, and people changing jobs and things, nobody, it's not like Thailand, or it's not like the Philippines, where a lot of foreigners are staying long term, and people are becoming aware of them learning the language to a high degree of fluency. I think a lot of people just assume that we know how to say Mingala ba lapeye poman tequet, or something, which is a version of, hello, one one regular tea, please, right? So
But
I'm sure,
even
yeah,
even if you are able to say one or two words and some basic, well-rehearsed greetings, my experience would be that you would be received well because you would be sort of doing something that impress at least people, local people know that you're making an effort. You talked about how there are instances where you were offered discounts or given offered things that were probably not on the menu, but only local people will be able to order because you spoke Burmese. Does
yeah.
that yeah?
Yeah, so
One
before I answer that, I want to just interrupt for a second.
yeah.
I found it funny. I'd be speaking to somebody in Burmese, and I have a friend with me, for example, another Nangachata friend, right, another
Mm.
foreign friend, and I would be speaking to this individual in Burmese, and they're just interacting with me normally, and then they would turn to my friend and say, "Kamya tangeje ha ba malu pyo dat la," and then he would just say something like, "Oh, Amyaji Matepbu, Nene Papa," or something like that. And they would be like, "Ha, ha, Tore, ha, kwa," and then they would just react completely differently to the to my friend's, one line compared to the whole conversation I just had. So I mean, yeah. I think it's interesting. So I kind of have to think: is this because I've reached some kind of level? I've reached the level where I'm not surprising anymore, or something like that. I don't know, but that was one anecdote I wanted to tell you, and then uh, tell to any of the viewers still watching that might happen too, where you might reach a point where nobody is really surprised anymore, uh, but some people will still not know what to do with you. But to answer your thing, um, uh, oh shoot, I've lost track, kind of. What
Some
was the question you asked again?
some
Just
nice
just briefly.
gestures and goodwill that you experience because you were
Yeah.
able to interact with them in Burmese.
Yeah, yeah.
For
Okay, yeah.
example,
So,
merchants offering you discounts and things like that.
yeah. So that does happen. I mean, in Southeast Asia, it's kind of notorious that foreigners have to pay double prices or whatever for entering museums, and that's a completely separate issue that I don't want to get into here. But I have had people tell me, because you speak Burmese and I respect your effort, right? And they usually would always say, "Oh, ခင်ဗျားဗမာလိုတက်တာကျွန်တော်လေးစားတယ်ဆိုတော့လေကျွန်တော်ဈေးနာနဲ့ဒါကိုဈေးလျှော့ပေးတာနော်." And they would say, like, "I respect your effort to learn Burmese, and so I've lowered the price for you." And so that's always a nice feeling, right? Because this person actually understands the struggles that you've gone through to learn this, or you know
Well, they appreciate the effort you make to speak to them in their mother language, shall we say.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, as for the tea shop, basically it's kind of with any restaurant, right? You can look at a menu and you say, well, if they have this and they have that and they have these ingredients, couldn't they also make these, right? And so, although it's not on the menu, because I can speak Burmese, I can just simply ask, "Oh, hey, can you make this?" And they'll usually say, "Meiji me," and then they'll, go back into the kitchen, and then they'll come out and they'll be like, "Oh, yare, cool." And then yay, I can get this thing that I want that's not on the menu. Whereas if I were just to try to, I don't know, gesture in English or something, I probably wouldn't be able to communicate that.
Probably
But
not. Let's take a look at some of the comments here. Go ahead. One person. So, what are the hard or difficult Burmese vocabularies? Advanced one. I know layman level of Burmese, so that's why I'm asking. I guess if you know the basic kind of survival level of Burmese, the next level of vocabularies will be difficult. Will be if you start to get into topics like culture or literature or Burmese specific things like vocabulary that has to do with temples and monasteries and things like that. Those would be pretty challenging at the advanced level. What are your thoughts? Going အတွက်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဒီအခြေခံအဆင့်ပြီးသွားလို့ရှိရင်အဆင့်မြင့်မှာအဆင့်မြင့်မှာဘယ်လိုဝေါဟာရမျိုးတွေသင်ရတာတွေပါတယ်အခက်အခဲတွေ့ခဲ့ဘူးလဲ
ဟုတ်ကဲ့ကျွန်တော်အတွက်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်တကယ်ပြောမှဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဒီခုနပြောသလိုလိုဒီအိမ်ထဲမှာသုံးတဲ့ပစ္စည်းတွေရယ်နောက်တော့စောက်လုပ်ရေးနဲ့ပတ်သက်တဲ့ပစ္စည်းတွေရယ်ဟိုတကယ်ပြောမှဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ပဟုတုတနဲ့ပတ်သက်ဟာတွေပေါ့ဘာလို့လဲဆိုတော့ဘာသာရေးဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ကျွန်တော်အမေရိကန်ကနေပြီးတော့ဗုဒ္ဓဘာသာအကြောင်းရယ်မြန်မာခရစ်ယာန်ဘာသာအကြောင်းရယ်ကျွန်တော်အတော်လေးကိုလေ့လာခဲ့တယ်ဆိုတော့ဒီမြန်မာကျမ်းစာထဲမှာရှိတဲ့ဒီဆရာယူဒတန်ဘာသာပြန်တဲ့မြန်မာကျမ်းစာထဲမှာရှိတဲ့စကားလုံးအတော်များများကိုကျွန်တော်နားလည်တယ်။ဘာဖြစ်လဲဆိုတော့ကျွန်တော်ကငကိုကလေးကအဲ့ဒါတွေကိုလေ့လာနေခဲ့တယ်။ဒါပေမဲ့ခုနပြောသလိုလိုရေခေါင်းတို့ရေပိုက်တို့အဲ့ဒီဟာတွေအမေရိကန်မှာနေတော့ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အဲ့ဒီစကားလုံးတွေကိုသိစရာလည်းမလိုဘူးပမာလို့လေဖြစ်လဲဆိုတော့ကိုကအဲ့ဒါတွေပြုပြင်ဖို့လိုတယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အမေရိကန်မှာရှိတဲ့ဆိုင်တွေကိုသွားပြီးတော့အင်္ဂလိပ်လိုပြောပေါ့ဆိုတော့မလိုအပ်တဲ့အချိန်မှာအဲ့ဒီစကားလုံးတွေကိုမသိဖြစ်လို့ခုချိန်မှာလည်းကျွန်တော်တိတ်ပြီးတော့မပြောတတ်ဘူးဒါပေမဲ့အခုနိုင်ငံထဲမှာနေတယ်ဆိုတော့အင်္ဂလိပ်လိုပြောဖို့အဆင်မပြေတဲ့အခါမှာကိုကကြိုက်မကြိုက်အဲ့ဒီအခြေအနေကိုကျွန်တော်ရောက်နေပြီဆိုတော့ဒီအခြေအနေအဆင်ပြေရအောင်ကျွန်တော်ပြန်သင်ရတယ်ပြဿနာကအခုကျွမ်းကျင်ပြောတတ်ပြီးသားဆိုတဲ့ခါကြတော့ကိုကလည်းခုနပြောသလိုဒီလိုမျိုးပို့ပြီးတော့ဆက်လက်ပြီးတော့တိုးတက်ရအောင်ဒီလိုပဲဒီအစစ်မှာပဲဆက်လက်ပြီးတော့မနေဖို့အင်မတန်မှတိုးတက်စေဖို့ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ကိုကစွမ်းအားအတော်များများကိုထည့်ပြီးတော့စူးစမ်းရတာပေါ့နော်ဒါပေမဲ့ပမာလိုကြတော့တကယ်နားလည်ဖို့လိုတဲ့အကြောင်းအရာတွေဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဒီလိုဖြစ်မယ်ဗုဒ္ဓဘာသာကိုကဗုဒ္ဓဘာသာယုံကြည်သူမဟုတ်ပေမဲ့လည်းဗုဒ္ဓဘာသာယုံကြည်သူမဟုတ်ပေမဲ့လည်းကိုကဒီဗုဒ္ဓဘာသာဗုဒ္ဓသာသနာအကြောင်းဗုဒ္ဓသာသနာနဲ့ပတ်သက်တဲ့စကားလုံးတွေကိုသိဖို့ကလိုတယ်ထင်တယ်ဖြစ်လဲဆိုတော့ဒီဗုဒ္ဓဘာသာဘယ်ဘဲသွားဖျားတွေရှိတယ်ဇေဒီတွေရှိတယ်ဘုံကြီးเจ้าတွေရှိတယ်ဘုံကြီးတွေရှိတယ်ဆိုတဲ့ခါမှာဒီနိုင်ငံထဲမှာအကြီးဆုံးဘာသာရေးဖြစ်နေတဲ့အတွက်ကြောင့်မလို့ကိုကဒီယဉ်ကျေးမှုကိုရောဒီဘာသာစကားကိုရောလေ့လာခြင်းနဲ့ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဗုဒ္ဓဘာသာအကြောင်းကိုသိဖို့ကလိုမယ်ထင်တယ်ပြီးရင်နိုင်ငံရေးရာကြတော့သိဖို့ကကြတော့ကောင်းမယ်လို့ထင်ပေမဲ့လည်းမသိရင်လည်းပြဿနာတော့တိတ်ပြီးတော့မရှိဘူးဒါပေမဲ့အနည်းဆုံးတော့ဒီစီးပွားရေးနဲ့ပတ်သက်တဲ့ဝဟာရရယ်စီးပွားရေးရယ်တဘာဝရယ်နောက်တော့လူမှုရေးပေါ့ဘာဖြစ်လဲဆိုတော့ကိုကသတင်းစာဖတ်မယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်မြန်မာသတင်းစာထဲမှာအများအားနိုင်ငံရေးအပြင်ပေါ့စီးပွားရေးအများအားပါတယ်စီးပွားရေးရယ်လူမှုရေးရယ်နောက်တော့တဘာဝရယ်အဲ့အကြောင်းအရာ၃ခုအများအားပါတယ်ကဗျာတွေဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ကျွန်တော်မှာကဗျာစာအုပ်အတော်များများတော့ရှိတယ်ကျွန်တော်အခုချိန်မှာအလုတ်ကလည်းနည်းနည်းများနေတော့ကျွန်တော်မဖတ်ဖြစ်ဘူးတကယ်ပြောမယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဒါပေမဲ့စုတော့စုထားတယ်နားကမှာအငိမ့်စားယူပြီးသွားရဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အများကြီးဖတ်ရအောင်ကျွန်တော်စုတော့စုနေတာပဲအင်မတန်မှခဏအင်္ဂလိပ်လိုပြန်ပြောရအောင်ပေါ့so I took a huge hiatus there speaking in Burmese just to prove to the commenters that I'm not a fraud but so yeah in Myanmar the toughest thing for me is actually like the everyday words, anything that has to do with stuff at home, anything that has to do with, a building or anything like that. Because when I was first learning Burmese, I learned it in America, right? So I only learned the Burmese that was necessary in the United States. I didn't have to know the word for sidewalk. I didn't have to know the word for spigot. I didn't have to know the word for hose. Because if I needed something like that, I could go to any home improvement store or whatever and buy it in English. I didn't need to know the Burmese words. I never worked as a repairman in Burmese homes, so I never had to explain. I never had a Burmese person come to my house to look at my sink or anything, so I didn't need to know these words. Only when I got here and, suddenly I can't really use English for these things, I have to suddenly learn these terms. I'm forced into this situation, and in order for me to make the best of it, I have to know the terms. But as for anybody coming to Myanmar in general, I would say when I thought about it, besides Buddhism, because Buddhism is kind of, everywhere you go, there's Buddhist temples, there's Chedi, there's Zaidi, there's monasteries, there are monks walking everywhere, and I think it would be useful to learn not the Pali words necessarily, but the Burmese words that have to do with Buddhism. So, what is the word for feeding the monks? Because that's different. You would say jue for feeding like a child, but you wouldn't jue. Well, you can. It's just different though. It's a sun jue, and then the pongji they don't sa they a sun
Pompe,
can. Yeah,
Pompe.
yeah,
Mhm.
pombe. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're just different. They're just different words. They're but people talk about it all the time. Even if I walk down the street, you hear the middle-aged women talking about going to the paya and going to yurt their patan. And so, like, what's a patan? What's yurt? What's a nat? What are all these things? They're all things that you'll hear about off and on. And if you don't know these terminologies that come from Buddhism or kind of religion, you'll be missing out on a big part of people's lives. Other than that, like if you were to read newspapers and things, I would say the three big domains to know vocabulary in would be like economics or business, then nature, and then the third one, lumuye. So just things about, like sociology kind of, things about, living, just day to day life. But I would say words about business, yeah.
နိုင်ငံရေးဝါဒအရေးမကြီးဘူးလားနိုင်ငံ political vocabulary is that something you can live without or is it something you feel like you need to know to read the newspaper?
So I mean, if if you want to read the newspaper, there are going to be quite a few articles about politics. I'm kind of different because for a lot of time I avoided politics intentionally when I came here, and I avoided learning terms because I didn't want to talk about it, uh, and I just thought that that was the best way of, you know, because I didn't know if I came here, how free really is it to talk about these things? Is somebody just talking to me to see if I say something bad about the current government so they can, take me into the back alley and beat me to death? I didn't know, right? So I'm just like, nah, better to avoid it altogether. I didn't want to, even if I were interested, I wouldn't have picked up a radical newspaper and started reading it out in public. I just didn't want to do those things. Um,
Okay,
so for me, yeah,
sorry, our time is almost up, so I thought I may squeeze in one more comment and address that. One person wants to know, is it okay to shadow a textbook and is it useful to improve fluency? I'll chime in afterwards, but what about your thoughts? Is it helpful to strictly follow a textbook? For example, G
um,
mentioned the textbook. You followed it. Did you follow it pretty strictly, chapter
no, I
by
did not.
chapter?
I did not follow it very strictly. And it's because I noticed from the beginning that a lot of Burmese people I knew were speaking differently to how he was saying. So, for example, he taught the phrase "How are you?" as "Nekang yela." So, right,
Mm.
"Nekang yela," and most people I knew they didn't put "ye" in the middle of it, and so
It's just
I
in
was
Yakala.
immediately saying, "Yeah, Nekang la," and
Mm.
even you earlier you said "Nekang la," right? But really, most people, when they're speaking, the intonation they use is not la, even though it's kind of written, with the what's on long pao, it's written like la. it's more like la, and that's kind of this question intonation, right?
That's right.
But
Yeah,
but
that
yeah,
affects the tone.
it's
Yeah.
it's the effective intonation on the tone. But anyway, besides the linguistic stuff, textbooks are good. When and I would say with Burmese, it's probably best to get as many of them as you can and then use what is useful out of each of them. So definitely get both of Kenneth's textbooks, Tuttle Publishing, and also look at Patrick McCormick's colloquial Burmese that he co-authored with Seama Sansantintun. That's also a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, if you're up for it, you can get Matthias Yeni's Grammar of Burmese, as well as John O'Kell and Anna Allott's Grammatical Dictionary. The Grammatical Dictionary I found very helpful. But I would say, not all textbooks. Oh, there must be
From
something
my
going on
end,
at your end. Yeah, that's
I
okay.
forgot the window. Yeah.
Okay, let the breeze in. That's okay. But for example, John O'Kell's book starts off with like maps and stuff, and like it was probably good to use that book if you were living in Yangon at the time, right? If you were living in Yangon and you could place everything on the map and you go, oh, there's the Piashi Kojiang, there's the Paya, there's the Piadite, there's the Sadite, and it's good to learn all those things. But if you're living in America, it may not be immediately useful to you. So I would say, it's good to shadow a textbook if you can find something that's relevant to what you need at the time, because you may not need all the information right away, and I wouldn't overload yourself with the information. But I would say think about yourself as a learner, think about what your goals are for learning Burmese, what it is you want to know, and then find a textbook. Go to the library first. Don't just buy everything, right? Go to a library that may have them all, keep social distance and whatnot since it's 2020. But then get the books, flip through them, try listening to the audio and say, does this book meet my needs? And if it doesn't totally, supplement it with something else. But definitely nothing replaces human interaction, right? And
Yeah.
and even though we see like all these polyglots on YouTube and stuff going out, I even did it once with one of them. I've invited him to Fort Wayne and I accompanied him and he spoke with a
I
lot of
remember
Burmese
that.
people.
I
Yeah, in
remember
basic
that.
Burmese. It was great fun. But I mean, really, even more important than speaking a lot is just listening, right? Like Kenneth said, you need to get the nuanced things from the Burmese people, which is why he recommended going to a tea shop. It's why I recommend going to a tea shop, because the textbooks can't teach you everything. Textbooks have deadlines. There's only a certain number of pages that can go in. People get burned out when they're writing. I would know. I had to write a thesis. You can't include everything. It's impossible. So
True. Yeah.
textbooks are good, but textbooks aren't perfect. So I
I
hope
would
that.
say a good textbook give you the absolute basic necessities like how to pose yes no questions or how to
Yep.
pose who, what,
Yep.
where, when, why questions, and how to use auxiliary verb like can or should or must
Yep.
so that you can express these basic ideas. But beyond that, if somebody wants to get to intermediate level and beyond that point, one actually has to get a lot of input and
Yep.
just muddle your way through natural conversations, right? Because
Yep.
you cannot, if you're always afraid of making mistakes and you don't want to say anything unless you can say something perfectly, you wouldn't develop these reflexes to automatically respond to people in that language that you're learning. Um, I guess our time is almost up, so I apologize, viewers, if we were not able to get to your comments. I promise you afterwards, I look at them, and Go Wei will also look at them and address whatever that he and I both can. So Go Wei, and any last words of encouragement for people who are going through the journey that you went through?
Yeah, the encouragement I would say is don't give up and be a little bit stubborn sometimes. But I would say that even though looking back, it probably wasn't very nice of me when I first started learning Burmese, I wouldn't even allow certain Burmese people to speak to me in English, no matter how bad my Burmese was. And
Yeah.
sometimes I remember people got really upset and frustrated that I wouldn't just let them speak to me in English. And I told them later, this is something I have to do. I need the input. I need the practice because I'm not going to get it anywhere else. So definitely, especially if you're living in country, just ask people around you to speak to you more in Burmese.
Very good, very good. I would echo what you're saying as well. I think if you're studying Burmese in a foreign country, definitely you don't have the opportunity to be surrounded by Burmese sounds and different Burmese speakers. So then you may actually have to seek out an overseas Burmese community and make friends with somebody. These days, it's
Hmm.
much easier than you think because you can go on Facebook and find these communities in your
Yeah.
local area. But if you are living in Yangon, then take advantage of that fact and go to a tea shop,
Yeah.
go to places where people will gather, but definitely do according to social distancing rules because we want you
Yeah.
to learn these, but also be safe and stay alive.
Yes.
So,
Indeed.
Wayne, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts. I really appreciate it. Okay. All the viewers, thank you very much for joining us. Until next time, hope to see you again. Bye bye.
Bye bye.